Good afternoon, and welcome back to the Money Advantage podcast. This is Rachel Marshall and Bruce Wayner, and we have a special guest with you today, and that is Josh Kanter. He is the founder of Leaf Planner, and I'm so excited, Josh, to be able to share you with our tribe and our audience here at the Money Advantage because your work is exceptional and profound in working with families who really want to have a communication mechanism, not just details and facts and figures, but the why behind everything so they can transition really well as they're thinking about generational wealth and generational legacy planning. And your story alone is fascinating, Josh. So we're just really honored to be able to have you join us today.
Well, thank you both for having me. I'm excited to be here and excited for this conversation.
Awesome. And Bruce, I would love to hear some of your thoughts as we're getting into this conversation today, really just about everything that you've seen so far with Josh's work.
Well, I think there's uh, one of the things that if you're going to have generational wealth, you have to make sure that there's no erosion to that wealth. And many times people think all the legal instruments are taking care of all the erosion, but the problem with all these legal instruments is people get in the way, and they really get in the way when they're family members. And people think that family members would communicate with each other very well and very succinctly and very clearly, but they don't. And so I was very intrigued by Josh's work. Josh, I saw one of your podcasts, and the person asked you, the definition of a family office. And I'll let you go ahead and talk about that later. But at E3, we actually developed what we call a family office model. And the family office model was for people that were not quite prepared yet to have the assets for a true single family office, but we're striving to get there. And so, we often about ourselves as being a general contractor and providing all the subcontractors for people. And so that really resonated with me when I looked over the Leaf Planner, which I'm sure you're going to talk about. Not only are those documents available, but also how they intertwine and the people you should be communicating and why this person is important in that person's life. And I think that is very, very important for the success of a family generational wealth plan.
Yes. So if you're hearing anything, if you're listening today and you're hearing generational wealth, a plan for generational wealth, you're in for a real treat today. Even if you're not in a position of thinking, I have a lot of wealth to pass on to my family, I really want you to tune into this conversation. Not only is it going to be rich and just really exciting, Josh's story is beautiful and fascinating, and how he's got to where he is right now and providing a wonderful service to families is just so impactful. So, Josh, I would love if you could just share a little bit of your background. First of all, for anyone who doesn't know you, just who are you? Then we'll dig back into your background and your story.
Sure. And I do want to say, just the way that both of you sort of set that up, I think, many of the things that I hope we'll talk about today really, I would say apply to anybody who's thinking about their wealth at any level. And while my last 25 years, as we'll talk about, has been in kind of the ultra high net worth and family office spaces, and that's really where I spend most of my time kind of thinking and contributing. These are issues that really impact every family, and certainly Rachel and the work that you guys do,
Hmm.
you know that, and it's so important, as you indicated, to get past the kind of what and where to the how and why. And especially as you start thinking about things for families that may have a faith-based approach to what they're doing, or whatever, values-based in any particular way. And so these things are, I'd say, just, really important for every family. So I appreciate that you indicated everybody should be, kind of thinking about this regardless of wealth level. And the other issue that comes up with that for me all the time is most people who are starting to accumulate wealth, especially if they're a little on the younger side, haven't really done the math and realized if they're in their 30s maybe and worth 5 or $10 million today, start to extrapolate that and compound that until they're in their 80s, and they have really significant wealth. And so starting to think about these issues earlier than later is in my view, always a positive. So I appreciate that you were kind of pointing to people to do that. So obviously I'm Josh. I it's hard to separate, I guess, the who am I from my story, but I'll I guess the short version of who I am
Let's go.
currently.
You can go ahead and jump into your story. It's
Okay,
amazing.
either way, happy to do that. But I originally am a lawyer from Chicago. I happen to live in Salt Lake City. That's not really relevant to anything other than from a lifestyle decision, decided to move here almost 25 years ago and raise our kids here. I came into the family office world actually as a result, and again, we'll talk about obviously the story, but as a result of my father's death 25 years ago. Happy to dig into that and have basically spent the last 25 years in kind of the family office world thinking about issues around multi-generational wealth, multi-generational, multi-branch families, what family dynamics is all about, how all of these things really relate to each other, and doing that both in the context of running a single family office for our family, which is three generations and three branches of the family, consulting with other families and working alongside hundreds of other families, and then starting a software platform called leafplanner that we'll probably talk about a little bit as well that you guys both alluded to, which is really designed to help families at any wealth level, again, really start to think more holistically about some of these issues around, again, as Bruce, you indicated, my definition, or obviously not mine alone, but the definition of a family office being anybody who's got wealth that could potentially be multi-generational wealth, I would argue, is kind of a family office in one way or another. Not maybe not in the traditional sense of the wealth level and running a single family office, but coordinating information and bringing this holistic picture together. So uh, I'll stop there for a second. That's kind of who I am, and
That's
I
excellent. And I really appreciate, Josh, just even you talking about the application and applicability of all of the context of this whole conversation to any wealth level. And I love the background and your story that led you into this in the first place. It's so fascinating. So go ahead and share how you came into this multi-generational wealth space as it relates to your family.
Yeah, so we have I think, an interesting story. What I always like to say about our story is I hope nobody else has the same story, but I hope it rhymes enough that everybody will, somebody will come up, everyone listening will come up with something and say, "Oh, I get that. That rhymes enough with my situation to understand why I think, of course, my story is important to how I get to where I am, but at the same time." To why I'm so passionate about the work that I do and the way I describe it. So our story is a family story, as these things almost always are. As I said, I grew up in Chicago. Growing up, there's a reason I'm going back to my childhood, but growing up, my dad was probably, for lack of a better description, I'd say the world's most renowned tax lawyer of his era. Represented kind of a who's who of corporate industrial America, kind of all the major families of multi-generational wealth of that era. Uh, Really, really fascinating guy. His fingerprints are sort of all over the estate planning work that most of us continue to do today and the strategies that we use today. So again, just a super, super interesting, kind of famous in at least in tax circles, very, very famous guy. And he ended up going more into the venture capital space in the early 1980s. My brother, who at the time was working on Capitol Hill, decided to leave Capitol Hill and went to work with my dad on the venture side of our sort of family. And then I ended up coming out of law school in the late 1980s and became coincidentally a corporate and securities lawyer. And so ended up doing a lot of the work with my dad and my brother for our venture funds and our portfolio companies, and ultimately representing our family. And one of the things I like to say, because again, Bruce, to the extent that you made some comments about the family office definition, if you had uttered the words family office to me back in those days, I jokingly like to say I wouldn't know how to spell that, let alone what it meant. It simply was we were three guys with the same last name who happened to be working together. We were in three different locations. We were, not doing everything together every day, but three family members who happen to be working together. Anyway, that went along really nicely for about 15 years. And unfortunately, as these things go, in 2000, we found out my dad had cancer and was going to die. He was 70, so still very young, deal junkie, globetrotting. Seems younger and younger every day as I'm now 63, suddenly 70 is really, really young. Uh, and he was the quintessential patriarch of a family of three generations and three branches, as I was describing earlier. So we realized, quickly that we were facing a situation we didn't expect to face. Of course, nobody ever expects to face it, and yet there we were. He was definitely the guy. My dad had hobbies. He had no hobbies. His hobbies were work. And so
Mm.
we, all said this is a guy who was going to die at his desk at 100 of a heart attack. And yet here he was, leaving 30 years earlier than we thought he was going to. So I left my practice to come work now exclusively for my family and really help figure out how do we navigate through all this. And so when I talk about the complexity of our family and hopefully rhyming a little bit, I really hope nobody else is in quite the same situation. But we were filing 750 tax returns a year for our family alone. We were in the middle of what would turn into a 33-year battle with the Internal Revenue Service that went to the U.S. Supreme Court. We had a complicated balance sheet. We had family dynamics issues. I jokingly, again, would say, we all get along exceptionally well, but there's no family that doesn't have family dynamics issues. And so we had family dynamics issues as any family of three generations and three branches would have. And all of that had to be navigated. Um, and so my job, essentially, in coming in while my dad was still alive and ill, was to figure out how do we navigate through this and how do I bring myself up to speed in to whatever extent I could. And I ended up getting a huge gift. I got 18 months with my dad before he died. Obviously, he had cancer. Not every day was a good day, but that's a lot of time to spend with somebody. And I spent literally every day with him for that 18 months. And I have to tell you, it's just still to this day remarkable to me. I'm a lawyer. I took his estate planning class in law school. I had 18 months with him. I would argue you don't get better prepared than having a family member like me, not to pat myself on the back, but that's unusual. And to have that kind of time and that kind of preparation. And yet, after he died, I feel like it was within minutes of his death. I'm sure it was days, not minutes, but it feels like it was within minutes of his death. People started asking me questions that I couldn't answer. And I realized very quickly, if I can't answer these questions, if I'm in the dark, what does that say about my mother, my brother, my sister, my wife? I didn't have kids yet, but my kids, everybody else is way more in the dark than I am. And that really kind of set me off both on the family office journey, but it really set me off on this journey of saying, we're doing this wrong. How do you think about educating and engaging and empowering family members and advisors in this more holistic, again, I didn't even know the words family office yet, in this more holistic way? How do you move past the what and where to the how and why? I knew where all the documents were. I knew where all the LLC agreements were and the trust documents were. That wasn't the problem. The problem was understanding the context in which these things were created or understanding who were the thousands of people in my dad's Rolodexes that sat on his desk back in those days, that I didn't know Bruce from Rachel and who he trusted and who he didn't trust and why these people were sitting on his desk. And so, anyway, I don't want to go too long here, so
Josh,
I'll
this is
stop, but
fascinating, and
that's
I'll comment, and then I want Bruce to as well, just because I've heard this story before, which is why I feel I don't know, even enraptured might be the word for this again, all over again. There's so much preparation and planning that we help clients through with Seven Generations Legacy planning, and I'm hearing in your story, I'm hearing this father really well connected, doing a lot of things. I mean, 750 tax returns is not a small matter in any stretch of the imagination. And so you're looking at the scope and the context of this family that still has a hub, and that hub was your dad, and transitioning that hub to be something that people could pick up the pieces when it's much more than a house and a retirement account. There's a lot more that was happening. And I think even if you're just in a position where maybe it is a house and a retirement account and a few, other extraneous things here and there still is that transition process that nobody can know what you know unless you've communicated that effectively. And that communication is so critical. And I love that you saw this void, this need for transferring that knowledge so that somebody could find the answers to the questions, so they could be able to make decisions. And I think anyone who's been through a process of probate. I watched my mom go through probate with her father. I've seen other people go through the process of having to pick up the pieces after a loved one has passed. There are so many questions. There are so many things that you wish that even if you communicated the heart of the matter, you still want to make sure that all of the details are captured as well. And so that's just setting the tone and the context for this conversation, why your work matters so greatly. But Bruce, I'd love to hear your thoughts or comments on anything so far.
Well, I mean, I have thoughts, but I respect Josh as a guest, so I just have a question for him. Um, everybody tries to figure out and get the answer and have that answer to be in place like it's a final destination, and you got to the destination and you're done. And what I try to tell people all the time is that it's the journey to the destination. The planning has to be dynamic. And because the planning is dynamic, that's why communication needs to be ongoing. But that communication, you need to be speaking the same language. And uh, setting that up for you, Josh, and I know this is difficult because people ask me this all the time, but what would you say is the one thing that you either have to start with when you're trying to not have erosion on, um, generational wealth, or the one thing that you must get covered eventually so that you don't have erosion in generational wealth?
Yeah. Um, so hard to narrow it down to one thing,
I
I guess,
know.
obviously, right? As you know, Bruce, I think that first of all, the notion of erosion of generational wealth, I mean, I guess, first families have to decide what is that goal, right? And it's always interesting to me. This is something I spent a lot of time thinking about over the last few years, where in the work I do with families and the people who obviously you and I probably know a million people in common. Um, when you talk about philanthropy and a family's philanthropy, philosophy around philanthropy, we often have conversations about, is this about a spend down philosophy? Is this about a sustainable perpetuity philosophy, et cetera? And we very rarely talk about that in the context of the for-profit wealth, if you will.
Yeah, before you go further, will you just for our listeners explain the difference between the two?
Sure, sure. So a lot of people will talk about in the context of their philanthropic work, if they have a family foundation or a donor advised fund or, any other philanthropic entity of saying, hey, I want to spend this down. I want to spend all this money during my lifetime or within 10 years of my death or something like that. So that's often referred to, right, as a spend down philosophy. Other people might say, I want this to go on into perpetuity. I want my kids and my grandkids and my great grandkids and generations to come to be using this foundation or donor advised fund or whatever, again, the structure is.
So that
Um,
the principle would be preserved,
well,
and
so yeah,
and you,
yes, the principle would be preserved. So, that's a really common conversation in philanthropic circles. And again, I'll say it feels to me like it's much less common, almost non-existently common in the for-profit. We assume that the goal should be perpetuation of family wealth. And so one, I just want to say, like, it's okay for people who say maybe that's not the goal, right? Maybe I don't care about the perpetuation of this wealth beyond the next generation or generations to come. So there's a difference, at least it seems to me, of eroding unintentionally or eroding intentionally. So if
Mm.
you're eroding intentionally or you're eroding because math ultimately says if everybody continues to have kids and the family grows, it's almost impossible, as you again know, to keep up on a per capita basis. So it depends what does erosion mean and all these other things. Anyway, to your real point, I think um, I'd say if I really had to narrow it down to one thing, it really is going to be around communicating around values because I think it's so important to be able to or really just I'll say the communication piece. It's so important to be
Mhm.
able to communicate um and talk about what we're doing and do we have a shared purpose and how do we make reach decisions and how do we handle conflict in a situation where in one conversation you're my sister, in another conversation you're my co-shareholder, in another conversation you're my boss, right? All these different things. And you guys probably know the story in one of Jay Hughes's books when he's talking about roles and responsibilities. And he's got this family that's switching hats, and the dad and the son are sitting down and they're wearing their hats and they've printed on their hats like boss and um, employee or whatever it is. And the dad says to the son, "Son, I'm really sorry. I'm here to tell you that we have to let you go." And then he switches hats and takes off his boss hat and puts on his dad hat and says, "Son, Mom and I just heard you've been laid off. What can we do to help?" And so, it
I
to
do
me,
remember.
I love that story so much because it's such a simple embodiment of understanding how you have to communicate and understand the role that you're in as you're communicating and what's the goal in that communication. And so I don't know if I'm really answering your question, Bruce, but I think that communication is at the heart of so much of this. Um, that it seems
No,
to me that's
and what's even makes it, I think, even more difficult to articulate is we all have different ideas of what communication is.
certain.
For some people, communication is never emotional. It's only logical.
Yeah,
Um, and other people, it's always emotional. It's
yeah,
not logical at all. And how helping people understand their style of communication, I think, is also very, very important. And the best way you do that is actually, I think, is actually pointing those styles out to people.
hmm
Um, it's just so that they understand it. And I try to tell people um, is you do it you don't do it at a time of crisis. You have to do it at a time
right,
of calmness.
right.
You have to come to that agreement uh, before that time because people do not listen as well in time of crisis
Yeah.
unless they're prepared in time of calmness.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with that. And I think it's both a prepared in time of calmness, as you're saying, and it's practice, right? Again, as you
Hmm.
certainly know as well as I do, right? It's going through these things over and over and over again and having years of practice so that you're not trying to exercise those muscles for the first time in that moment of crisis. And
Mm.
I think there's something, obviously I'm a lawyer by background, not a psychologist of any kind, but there's something in psychology about not making decisions within 90 days of uh, a
The
trauma
loss of a
of
loved
some
one.
kind, right?
Yes.
Because you're not going to make as wise a decision. I heard this great line recently that was, don't make decisions at dusk. It's the time when you think you can see everything, but you can't. And so, it's these concepts of saying the better prepared you are, as you said, Bruce, in that moment of calmness, the better able you are to enter that moment of trauma and be able to make the kind of decisions that have to be made. And I'd say that's critically important to, again, go back to your original comment of avoiding unintentional erosion and mistakes.
So, so beautiful. And I think part of that all, I mean, you were saying it's really hard to boil down, but you came back to that concept of communication. And I think of course, communication has layers. I think sometimes even just the intent to communicate about the wealth at all. I think sometimes that decision is being broached as a family is having young children growing up, and they're saying, okay, when is the appropriate time now to ex, to expose the wealth, the level of wealth to
hmm
these young people who ultimately, if you don't speak about it at all, will just be surprised by this as Jay Hughes says, a meteor, slapping them out of orbit
Right.
because it's unexpected. And so the communication at all, I think sometimes as imperfect humans, we take stabs at things, and in our imperfection, I think communicating at all about the wealth or about intentions of the wealth, or as you were saying, the values component or why it matters is so priceless, because if you can get to the heart of the matter and at least do your best at that communication, you're going to be way further ahead when that crisis does happen. And I heard a line that said most of the time, if you're generation one, the first time your children will ever have to work together is to plan your funeral. How much better if you had some context for them to be working together before that, so they
Yeah.
have been, to your point, exercising that muscle and preparing ahead of time to know what they're how they can work together and collaborate for these bigger objectives, which ultimately will include the family enterprise.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's right. I think the other thing, Rachel, that you just touched on, which I think is really important, is the notion of it's an element of communication, right? But it's transparency.
Hmm.
And I find, much like your comment, many families will say to me, well, when should we tell the kids what the balance sheet is? As though that's the only question around transparency. And
Right.
so what I like to say to people is that, transparency in my view is a continuum, and it's not binary. I think people erroneously believe it's a binary decision of when do I show the balance sheet or when do I not? And in my view, transparency is really about, you can expose people to what are the mechanics. You can expose people to what are the values and the decision making that went behind these things long before you're talking about what are the numbers on the page.
Hmm.
And so I worked with a family a few years ago where mom and dad thought they were miles apart. And by the time we finished our conversation, I said, you guys, there's very little light between you because the only real light between you, philosophically, you guys agree 100%. The only light between you is that balance sheet transparency. And so if you eliminate that and realize how many things, it's kind of like in today's environment, right? We all have more things in common than we really do that tear us apart. We just are really good at emphasizing the things that tear us apart. And so I think it's
Very
it's
true.
really helpful for people to think about that kind of transparency continuum. And then with kids, and you guys, again, you guys know this as well as I do, but it's it's crazy how many people think they are hiding something from their children when, and obviously the extreme is always to say, look, when you're walking your kids on your private plane and they're saying, Daddy, why are there strangers on my plane when they fly commercial or whatever crazy stories, are out there. There's sort of that extreme. But Zillow is out there, Google is out there. Kids are not stupid. And
Hmm.
and now, and I don't know if you two have done this. Like I used to Google myself all the time. If you haven't put yourself into an AI chatbot and said, like, tell me about the life and times of Josh Kanter, oh my God, it's frightening what this thing, like Googling was bad enough, right? So if you think your kids aren't doing that and aren't learning, and the worst situation is they get misinformation because
Mm.
whether it's too high or too low or inaccurate in whatever different way, the idea that we're protecting our kids from knowledge about our own family and our own wealth is in this environment, this information age, it's kind of crazy.
I love, and I don't want to stay here too long just because there's so much more that we want to talk
Yeah.
about through the rest of this conversation. But I love that you brought up that continuum of transparency, because I haven't thought about it in those words before, but it's so relevant to training your children financially from a very young age,
Yeah.
all the way down to the 2 year old having chores and responsibilities to know that they're a contributor to the family operations and the family
Yeah.
household,
Yeah.
all the way to that super young, early formative year psychology, all the way up to managing money and saving money and understanding maybe some components of the decision making that you're doing and why you're making those decisions, which is more on the philosophical
Mhm.
side. But they can understand, hey, we don't spend everything we make. Hey, we
Yeah.
can buy this because we did this to work to earn this rather than money just appeared. And I think as as you begin to uncover or reveal those principles and some of the lessons about money, they're more primed then to be able to receive the right information at the right time
Hmm.
when it does get towards the mechanics or towards the numbers, because then they've been prepared for that along the way. So I love
Yeah.
how you mention that continuum of transparency, which basically you're essentially saying it's a journey. It's
Yeah.
a long journey. It's not a
A long
moment in
journey.
time.
Yeah. Yeah. And as a really simple example of that, I mean, my kids are 20 and 24, and we've been having these conversations and been along that continuum for so long that, now without even thinking about it, I make the full annual, my wife and I make the full annual exclusion gifts to our kids. And I don't have 1 second of hesitation, which is a significant amount of money in their life, right?
Hmm.
But I don't have 1 second of hesitation that they don't understand it, that they don't know what to do with it, that they're going to go blow it in Vegas. I mean, they get it because we've been having these conversations for years. So anyway,
I
moving
love
on.
that you even shared that. I mean that is a snapshot. That's like what do you call that? Like a clip that should be remembered by somebody. If they were going to take a soundbite, that's the word I was looking for, a soundbite from this show that you've been preparing them for years. You're not concerned that they're going to misuse a gift that is pretty substantial to someone in their
Yeah,
20s
yeah,
receiving. So I love that. And you said we've been having these conversations for years. Just so, so powerful. Okay. So let's kind of jump over to the work that you do through Leaf Planner
yeah.
and just the concept of what it does. I think sometimes people have maybe they've heard of, hey, I have a lot of different maybe assets, or I need to put everything in one place. And, we've heard of, or I'm probably aware of even more things than some of our clients are, but things like a program to put all of your, uh, let's go simple, a spreadsheet to put all of your bank accounts and all of your investment accounts and where to find everything, or a piece of paper that you've written somewhere, all the way to maybe something called Trustworthy, or there's books that you can chronicle everything in, or there's something called Knockbox. And you're in a space that is compiling information that somebody would need to understand and access at a transition, or to handle a transition well. I'm sure that they're not accessing it just at that point of transition. Um, but can you just explain big picture what is Leaf Planner, and what is the need for it
Sure,
in this
sure.
context?
Yeah, yeah. So, one of the things so let me go back to my dad's death. When my dad passed away, again, first of all, as I said, we're filing 750 tax returns. By definition, that means there's 750 entities out there. One of my initial responsibilities put on myself, like I created my own job and my own agenda, right? But one of my jobs was to say, hey, we need to simplify this structure. So I end up spending the next 10 years. So obviously, you don't just all of a sudden, wave the wand and these things go away. So I start reducing entities, merging entities, doing all these other things. But I quickly realize, well, wait a second. I'm the son of literally, to this day, the smartest person I've ever met. There's a reason we have 750 entities. And if I don't know what it is, then how can I take this structure apart if I don't know why it was put together? Right? My dad was not entity happy. There was a reason. So there's again, it's the context and the how and the why behind the what and the where. So you're right. Most families, or hopefully, if they're starting out well, right? They've got their spreadsheets or their Google Sheets, and they've got their Dropbox or Box or their physical files or whatever it is. I hope everybody's at least past physical files, but obviously we all know that there's lots of families that are still on physical files. And just ask everybody in the Palisades how dangerous that is at this point, right? Um, and so, the first stage I would say is moving toward that organization through spreadsheets and document management and things like that. The only way to really get to that next really important stage, and the tools that you're talking about, and there's lots of them out there, right? There's lots of books on Amazon. There's Knockbox, as you said, there's Trustworthy, there's lots of different things that are out there. Quicken just came out with a new one. I think it's called like Life Hub or something like that, right? Lots of things out there that'll do a basic version of this. What we saw missing, and I will say this is partly, coming at this from that family office lens. But again, I'd say that then goes, I hate to say downstream, but that goes downstream to every wealth level, is
Mm-hmm.
that those systems by and large don't capture, first of all, they're not really telling you what to think about. They're not really building a map or of this puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
They're more or less still doing a prettier, newer, more up-to-date version of the spreadsheet and the files, right? They're saying, here are the accounts, here are the documents, maybe here's some people, maybe here's the paint color in the kitchen, right? Whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is. What Leaf Planner attempted to do is say, okay, let's start with a blank slate. If you don't even know, if you're a first generation wealth creator, chances are you've been head down building a business. I can't tell you how many first generation families I work with. I'm sure this is true for you guys, who all of a sudden wake up one day and say, oh my God, I'm worth more money than I ever thought I was going to be worth. I don't even know what the questions are to ask. Most of those systems are not going to tell you what those questions are. So we first started and said, well, how do you think through that family office lens? How do you think holistically? How do you help people understand what are the questions to ask? So, for example, what Leaf Planner will do is map together all of this information in a way that says, okay, I'm going to look at Josh's life. And Bruce, you're a key advisor to Josh's family, and you touch these 17 things. And one of these things is you're a trustee of this particular trust. And here, yes, of course, here are the documents, and here's who the successor trustee is, and all these different things. But here's the story of why this trust was created. And this trust has a bank account at Northern Trust. And this trust owns my house. Well, guess what? My house has utility accounts. And we're art collectors, as you can kind of see behind me. That art collection is partly housed in that house. Well, that art collection has fine arts insurance. Well, we have a different broker for that fine arts insurance. And oh, by the way, we have a different relationship between the major auction houses that's really significant. So if you're going to sell something significant from our collection, the map is going to tell you who to go to. So again, you get on and on, you get deeper and deeper, layers deeper. If I present a trust to you and say, here's the trust document, has anybody described to you why I chose Bruce as my trustee? Has anybody described why, Rachel, I chose you as my trust protector? Right? All these decisions have answers to or have history to them, right? Or context to them. So the idea of Leaf Planner is to say, we want to help you understand what are the questions to ask. We want to then help you map this out in a way that my artist sister can understand, my kids can understand, my wife, who's brilliant but doesn't care about any of this, can understand, because when I get hit by the bus or go down in the plane or whatever's going to happen, she knows that she's in trouble because I handle all of this stuff. And every household, I will argue, has a division of labor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's what medications does the dog take to where are the financial accounts, chances are there's a division of labor. The lawyer knows this, the property manager knows that, the trustees know this, right? And people plan typically, if they plan at all, I'd say they plan for, again, using like the family office law, like what happens when mom and dad go down in the plane? Well, people very rarely think about what happens if one of my key advisors all of a sudden is gone. What happens if my 80-year-old lawyer retires? What happens if my property manager wins the lottery and quits? What happens if I decide I've got to fire my executive assistant? Whatever it is, there's so many people. So one of the things that, again, going back to my dad's death, there was, I like to say, information was either everywhere or nowhere. And what that
Mm-hmm.
meant to me was that it was so dispersed, it literally may be nowhere, or it never was written down, or it was in a million different places, whether that's systems. And so again, one of the ways we created Leaf Planner, for example, is to say Leaf Planner can be just a roadmap. It can be a treasure map. You don't have to, Leaf Planner our document management, for example, I'll say I'll put up against anybody. We're as sophisticated as it gets in document management. But if you're already using Box or Dropbox or Google Drive and that's what you want to use for document management, we don't care. Our answer is that's great. Let your family know that, right? How are they going to find what they need to find? I use Box. I've got 225,000 documents in Box. My kids are not going to find the letter that I wrote to them if I don't tell
Mhm.
them where it is. So we took Leaf Planner from this very holistic, again, very agnostic perspective to say, because I'm 63 years old and because I come from the family office world, sure, are we trying to make money? Of course we are. But at the same time, it's how do you fit, this is the old hand in glove, right? How do you fit in every family situation wherever they want us? And
Mhm.
how do you do this better? So I hope that was
Yeah,
helpful for
Josh, that
you.
was really helpful. And I think it's very apparent when you come from a family like you did that you had to figure all of this stuff out as you had this opportunity to ask your dad over those 18 months, which just graciously you were granted that time to be able to be with him. And yet there's still those questions that you said you didn't hadn't thought to ask, or where's this
Right.
particular information? And if you're listening today, I've had the pleasure of being able to look through what that Leaf Planner software looks like. And it just makes you think of everything. It makes me think of, well, yes, that thing is written down, but it's, on a piece of paper in between who knows what stacks of paper somewhere else, and I know where it is, but that doesn't do anything for somebody else who's trying to find that information. And Josh, I think what you've done, I actually just explained this just today, and this is why it's making me think of this. But the the classical model of education, our kids are using classical conversations, the homeschool curriculum, but it's based on the trivium, which is this grammar at the tip of this triangle, grammar, and then rhetoric or logic, and then rhetoric. Grammar being information, logic being the assembly or organization and making sense of that information, and then finally the rhetoric being the ability to communicate effectively about that entire body of knowledge and information. And I think what you've done with Leaf Planner is you've said there's a lot of information, there's a lot of facts. Many people are assembling the facts, but they're not telling the story, the
Mhm.
logic, the logic part of what matters and why it matters and how you can discard this information, but the story, the logic and the rhetoric components of that trivium are missing from a lot of this information download or information communication when it goes from one generation to the next. And
Mhm.
especially when you're in a context of wanting to maintain continuity or wanting to bless your kids and grandkids with what
Yeah.
you leave to them, or maintain some maintain the wealth rather than having it dispersed, even if it is dispersed intentionally. If you're trying to maintain it and you're trying to keep that in the family for
Mhm.
generations, you need to be in a position of having the ability to communicate the story, which is really the
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
behind all of
And
that.
and I think, Rachel, really importantly to me, I think I don't want to say an over focus because frankly, people don't have these conversations if there's not money involved. So, but
Hmm.
but it's not just the focus on preservation of wealth, it's preservation of family, preservation of relationships, right? One of the things I'll say to families all the time is like, you don't end up on the front page of the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal because you were looking for 10 more basis points of performance, right? You end up there because sister and brother are now suing each other. Chances are because they didn't know what mom and dad did and why they did it, right? And so even in Leaf Planner, for example, one of the things I say to people all the time is like, let's say I've got two kids, but let's say I had three. And so I want to explain why did I make my older son the my general power of attorney? My younger son is my healthcare power of attorney, and my fictional daughter, who I don't have, is nothing. Like, why did I do that? Because that's the kind of thing that's going to make the three of them, if there were three of them, at each other's throats saying, well, why did mom and dad do that? Right? It's all of that kind of context. It's preserving those stories. My dad represented a significant hotel chain, family who owned a hotel chain and the hotel chain in the United States and or international anyway. Um, and was very involved in building one of the particular hotels. And to this day, 50 years later, to this day, we get a check as a family from that hotel every year. And we will get that theoretically for the next 50 years. So there's importance around the check showing up, but there's so much importance about mine being able to tell now the grandkids the story about grandpa and how he was involved. And Leaf Planner's capturing all that. It's not just capturing the task to say, let's look for the check. It is, which is important. And it's capturing the documents from 1970, which are important, but it's capturing the story. And that to me is really powerful if you're thinking about passing on not just money, but a legacy and stories and family and values and all these things is how do you do that? And then reinforcing, you talk so much about education. How do you reinforce that? Because if you going back to Bruce's comment earlier, if you think of these things as a death product or a death tool, and they're only going to come out in that moment of trauma, okay, that's better than not having it. I'll concede that for sure. But if you can use it along the way as a life management tool, which Leaf Planner is designed to be, and you can use it as an educational tool, then again, my kids already they're familiar with everything in our Leaf plan. They understand how it works, whether it's as dumb as one of my kids' car didn't start recently, he had to find his AAA card. He knew it was in Leaf Plan. And for the first time, I didn't get the text saying, Dad, where's my AAA card? It was awesome, right? That's silly, but at the same time, it's that life lesson. It's helping them know those stories. It's helping them learn that. And then as I was saying earlier, I've been talking to my kids about these kinds of things for a long time. Maybe I've had 20 conversations with them about what a revocable versus an irrevocable trust is. Well, are they going to remember that? Hell, I'm not convinced my wife or my sister remembers that, let alone my kids. So Leaf Planner is designed again, if they're in their Leaf Plan and they see a trust and it says this is a revocable trust, guess what? That glossary definition is sitting right there to reinforce that education to say, hey, maybe you learn this somewhere else. Leaf Planner is not designed to be a curriculum, but it is designed to reinforce that education. So anyway, I'm sorry, maybe I'm going off track, but the idea is to use this
No,
as
this is
a
awesome.
wash, rinse, repeat process of educating, engaging, and being there when you want them to be there. Because if you teach your kids financial literacy, whatever that means, that's a broad topic, right? But you do it on a whiteboard, it's not the same as teaching it when they need it. And
Hmm.
so how do you bring all these things together when people actually need it?
So
Go ahead,
as
Bruce.
far as as far as we have about 30,000 subscribers to our channel and all of our downloads and so on and so forth. I'm sure somebody's going to say, that sounds great. How do I get this? Is this through a retail channel or is it only through an institutional channel?
No, we go direct to consumer and we also do kind of B2B enterprise work as well. So for advisory firms or anybody else who's out there. And you can reach out directly to me at josh@leafplanner.com. You can reach out to our general mailbox at hello@leafplanner.com. Or go on our website. There's some family assessment tools some free tools on there that'll help families think about how complex they really are. That'll take you through some EQ exercises about whether family members understand sort of that emotional intelligence within the family information. There's fire drill tools in there. So all kinds of things on the website. But anyone's welcome to reach out directly to me or to our team anytime.
So as far as because we do have a lot of advisors that listen also. So if you do work with wealth firms, do you find that they offer this just as a value add service for their clients, or is this something like an a la carte thing that people would, how is it generally
It's a
used
it's
in?
a little of both, honestly, because we see advisors who see it as a way of differentiating their offering for sure, right? We see the advisor who really wants to offer more of kind of that multifamily office service or offering to their clientele using it to be able to really, because it really does allow an advisor to offer, I'd say, at least family office light, by being able to see that more holistic picture and have a better conversation. Um, whether that's reviewing a leaf plan with a client, just like you would review your financial reports, reviewing your leaf plan with a client might generate oh, wait, the lawyers told us to move this asset into a rev trust, or, oh, it looks like you bought a new car, but you forgot to tell the insurance company, or whatever, whatever these different things are. So it lets the advisor be a more holistic advisor, and have deeper philosophic conversations with the family as well because of the use of Leaf Planner. So we see advisors who are just offering it as part of their offering. Some, maybe the revenue is not high enough or their model doesn't fit that, so they may offer it more on an a la carte basis, or may even just refer it out to us. Um, so we have models that work in any of those contexts. Our goal is to basically have any family or any advisor that sees a benefit of what Leaf Planner is doing to all or part of their book to say, let's find a way to work with you. And
Great.
that's partly I you guys probably know Simon Sinek's Golden Circle and why.
Oh yeah.
And if I think about like this is doing this at 63. Obviously, I'm not doing this for the same reasons I might have done this at 30. Um, and so for me, this is really about helping as many families as we can. And so we want to make this available in the right context, right, to anybody who's interested in it and sees the value of it. Because that's my
Mm.
why.
That's so
Awesome.
awesome, Josh. And Bruce, I'm glad you brought that up as well. I knew about the different ways of being able to provide it to clients, but also advisors being able to share that with their clientele. And so I would encourage you, if you're listening and if there's something that is of interest to you, at least go to their website, check out more information. If you're not ready to reach out to Josh directly yet, at least check it out. I think that it would be really valuable if you are listening and if this is of interest to you, I would go ahead and go to the website, get more information, go through that, the assessments that he has there. And this is just so beautiful to see. You're talking about the philosophy, the philosophical side of family wealth and family dynamics, even the details of the family. It's almost like you're taking something that maybe was just kind of a blur and you're bringing it into high
Hmm.
definition. You're showing all of the intricacies and the interconnectedness of all of the pieces of the family and how it's working. And I love that you mentioned it's something that you can access when needed as well. It's something that if you know the information is there, you know that you can go find the information. Maybe a spouse who doesn't care as much about the planning is not aware of every single word in the leaf plan, but they know
Hmm.
the context or the leaves of the plan and that they know that
Yeah.
they can drill down deeper and deeper and deeper. I'm thinking of like Wikipedia, if they wanted to keep drilling down and clicking the links and going deeper to get all of the information, if they needed to go on that bunny trail to figure out we are going to sell this piece of art and which place are we going to go to, they're going to know that they need to go check the leaf plan. I remember something about that, but I don't remember the detail. They're going to be able to go check it. And I love that you said that it's something you can access and use during your life. This is not just something for that transition, that it's a black box to everyone outside of me
Yeah.
while
Yeah.
I'm living, and then it opens to them when I pass away. This is really something that is dynamic, but also intended to be shared to aid that communication that's necessary with family members.
Yeah, and I think two things to that, which I didn't really mention. One is that there's a very robust sort of, I'll say, risk management uh, function, if you will, built into it. So, for example, we had an independent trustee who had been with our family for 53 years. Like that's really unusual, as you guys know.
Wow.
And he passed away a couple of years ago. And one of the ways that Leaf Planner, again, works because everything is this big mind map is I could immediately go into Leaf Planner when he was ill and say, okay, I'm going to finally lose this guy. How do I audit everything he's involved in? Well, he's been with us for 53 years. He's involved in a lot of stuff that goes back to the 1970s. It's how do I figure that out? Um, and then there's a very robust kind of alert and task management built into it as well because it's really, again, intended to be a workflow or a life management tool, as Rachel, you just described. And so even again, as simple as being able to assign to my kid that he's responsible for his own car registration, but he's going to get alerted. And the way that all again maps together within Leaf Planner is better than my having to call him or text him and say, hey, don't forget your car's registration is coming up. And it again is helping, frankly, just to teach life management to my kids.
Mm.
And I can watch it. So I know, because of course he's 20, I know he's actually not going to do it. And so now I can also watch it and say, I can send that text or that phone call and say, hey, have you gotten this done? Right. And so there's so much functionality designed around that idea. Um, yeah, anyway.
This is fantastic. Bruce, as we're getting close to wrapping up here, is there any questions that you have that you feel would be most necessary to ask? I feel like we've covered so much ground today. Josh, I just thank you for sharing your story. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
sharing the details of what Leaf Plan does and how it is this your why right now to really be able to help families be able to access this. Bruce, is there any kind of closing thoughts or questions that you had?
No, I just think if I just would like Josh to once again just reiterate how people could contact him, the website, and I think that'll be fine. I think I got all my um, points that I wanted to get out to the listeners today.
Awesome. Yeah.
Awesome.
Anyone's welcome to go to the website at leafplanner.com. Again, you can find me there, but I'm Josh at leafplanner.com. Um, hopefully it's my passion for this is clear and I love talking about family related issues. So if there's anything people want to talk about with or without Leaf Planner, happy to do it. Talk about trends in the industry and what's going on. But would welcome any conversations and really am so grateful to both of you for letting me be a part of this conversation today.
Josh, it's just been a pleasure. I am always delighted to be able to find people who just have something amazing to share with the world, and especially in this wealth, generational wealth, family dynamics space. And it was just apparent to me when I met you that not only is this coming from a history and a knowledge and a wisdom of walking through what you've walked through and learning through that experience, but just also just your passion and your desire to help people be able
Thank you.
to navigate these things in a better way than you had to yourself. And so it was just apparent. I just really appreciate your contribution to this show, to people's lives through Leaf Planner. And I'm just really thankful to be able to talk about this on the show. Glad to know you. I'm
You
grateful for the
too.
work that you're doing.
Thank you.
So please go check out leafplanner.com and reach out to Josh. And I would just say in closing, please remember success leaves clues. So model the successful few, not the crowd, and build a life and business you love. We'll see you.